The gunshot echoed through Dry Hollow's main street, but Arden Vale didn't flinch. She stood in front of the bank, revolver aimed at the sky, her voice cutting through the shocked silence. "I've got 5 days to save everything my father built, and I'm not asking permission from any of you." The banker's face went white. The crowd whispered. A young woman with a gun, a failing ranch, and nothing left to lose. This was the beginning of something the Arizona frontier had never seen before. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far Arden's story travels. And if you want to see how this impossible fight ends, hit that like button and stay until the very end. The morning her father died, Arden Vale learned 3 things: that grief has no schedule, that debt collectors have no mercy, and that the town of Dry Hollow had been waiting for this moment like vultures circling a wounded animal. She found out about the debt 2 hours after she buried him. The ranch house still smelled like sickness, that sour, metallic scent that lingers after someone fights death for weeks and loses. Arden had scrubbed the floors twice, burned sage in every corner, thrown open every window. Nothing helped. The smell of loss doesn't wash away. She was sitting at her father's desk, staring at ledgers she didn't understand, when the knock came. 3 sharp raps. Official, cold. She knew before she opened the door. The banker, Howard Grissom, stood on her porch with his hat in his hands and a leather folder under his arm. He had the decency to look uncomfortable, which almost made it worse. Arden preferred honest cruelty to this performed sympathy. "Miss Vale," he said, "I'm sorry to intrude during such a difficult time." She didn't move from the doorway. "Then don't." Grissom shifted his weight. Behind him, the Arizona sun was brutal and indifferent, baking the dust into something that caught in your throat and never quite left. "I'm afraid this can't wait. It's about your father's accounts with the bank. He always paid on time." "He did, until he couldn't." Grissom opened the folder, and Arden saw numbers that made her stomach drop. "Your father took out a loan 18 months ago to expand the herd. The terms were generous, but the payment schedule assumed certain market conditions that didn't materialize." Arden snatched the paper from his hands. The numbers swam in front of her eyes, figures that seemed impossible, deadlines that had already passed, interest that had compounded into something monstrous. "This says I owe $12,000. "I'm afraid so." "That's twice what the entire ranch is worth." Grissom's silence was answer enough. Arden's hands shook, but she kept her voice level. "When?" "The original terms gave you 60 days from your father's passing. However," he pulled out another document, this one freshly inked. "The bank's board met yesterday. Given the uncertainty of the situation, they've decided to accelerate the timeline. You have 10 days, Miss Vale. After that, the property reverts to the bank." She looked up from the paper, meeting his eyes for the first time. "My father was sick for 3 months. You knew he was dying. You waited until he couldn't fight back. Business doesn't stop for grief." "Get off my land!" Grissom put his hat back on, slow and deliberate. "I'll return in 10 days. I hope you'll have made arrangements by then." He paused at the edge of the porch. "You should consider Mr. Colton's offer. He's willing to buy the herd at a fair price, enough to settle a portion of the debt and leave you with something. Warren Colton wouldn't know fair if it bit him. He's offering you a way out." "He's offering me scraps after he helped engineer this trap. Tell him and your board and anyone else listening that they can all go straight to hell." She slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Inside, alone, Arden let herself breathe. Just breathe. Her father's rifle hung above the fireplace, his coat still on its hook, his coffee cup unwashed in the sink. 3 days dead, and she could still hear his voice. "You're tougher than this whole damn territory, girl. Don't you ever let them tell you different." She looked down at the papers in her hand. $12,000. 10 days. Impossible. She went back to the desk and started reading, really reading, every document her father had left behind. Bank statements, bills of sale, letters from buyers. The ledger told a story she'd been too busy to see while nursing him through his final months. The ranch hadn't been failing. It had been sabotaged. Her father's usual buyers had backed out of their contracts, one after another, right when he needed them most. Then came the convenient loan from Grissom's bank, at terms that seemed manageable until the market happened to turn. And now Warren Colton, who owned half the county and wanted the other half, was offering to buy her cattle at a fraction of their value. Arden sat back, understanding clicking into place like a round sliding into a chamber. This wasn't misfortune. This was a plan. She found her father's most recent letter, dated a week before he died. His handwriting shaky but determined. Arden. If you're reading this without me, then I've run out of time. I'm sorry I left you this mess. I thought I was being smart, expanding when I did, but Colton was smarter. He wanted this land and he knew exactly how to take it without drawing a gun. Don't sell to him. He'll give you nothing and take everything. The herd is worth $20,000 at the Flagstaff railhead. Double that if you can get them to the new yards in Prescott Valley. But that's a hard drive and you'd need men and time I couldn't give you. You're stronger than me. Always have been. If there's a way to beat him, you'll find it. Don't let them make you small. Arden read it 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in her pocket. The sun was setting when she walked out to the pasture where their 200 head of cattle grazed, unaware that their existence was now a countdown. They were good stock, healthy, well-fed, exactly the kind of herd that should have made her father wealthy instead of dead. She leaned against the fence rail, doing math in her head. Flagstaff was 200 miles north. The trail would take 2 weeks minimum with a proper crew. She had 10 days and no crew at all. Every ranch hand who'd worked for her father had found other jobs within hours of his death, almost like they'd been told to leave. Prescott Valley's new yards were closer, about a week's drive if she pushed hard, but that route cut through rougher country, and the buyers there were unknown. It was a gamble. 10 days. She needed 4 days to prepare, 6 days to drive the herd, and 0 margin for error. You look like you're planning something stupid. Arden spun around, hand dropping to the revolver at her hip, a reflex her father had drilled into her since she was 12. A man stood 20 feet away, hands visible and empty, clearly trying not to spook her. He was tall, lean in the way of men who work hard and eat less, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes that watched everything without seeming to watch anything at all. "This is private property," Arden said. "I know. I knocked on your door. No one answered." "So you came around back?" "I wanted to see the herd first." He nodded toward the cattle. "They look good. Better than good. Someone put real work into them." "My father." The stranger's expression shifted, not quite sympathy, but understanding. "I heard. I'm sorry." "Everyone's sorry. No one's helpful." Arden kept her hand near her gun. "What do you want?" "Work, if you're hiring." "I'm not." "You should be. Word in town is you've got 10 days to move this herd or lose everything." Arden felt her jaw tighten. Of course the whole town knew. Grissom had probably told half of them before he'd even reached her door. Word in town is usually exaggerated. "Is it?" "Because from where I'm standing, you've got a valuable herd, no crew, and a bank ready to take it all. That's not exaggeration. That's just bad odds." He took a step closer, slow and deliberate. "I can help with the odds. I don't know you. Rowan Cross. I've worked drives from Texas to Montana. I know cattle, I know trail, and I don't ask questions about other people's business. That's supposed to make me trust you?" "No, but desperation might." The honesty of it caught her off guard. Most men would have tried charm or intimidation. This one just stated facts and waited. Arden studied him. His clothes were worn but clean, his boots solid, his hands scarred in the way of someone who'd handled rope and leather for years. He wore a pistol but didn't carry himself like a gunfighter, more like someone who'd learned violence as a tool, not an identity. "I can't pay much," she said, then stopped herself. "Actually, I can't pay anything until I sell the herd. If I sell the herd." 60-40 split after expenses? "You'd risk weeks of work for maybe nothing?" Rowan shrugged. "I've made worse bets, and I don't think this is nothing." He looked past her at the cattle, then back at her face. "You're going to try it, aren't you? The drive. Alone, if you have to." She didn't answer, which was answer enough. "You'll die," he said matter-of-fact, "or lose the herd. Probably both. 200 head, rough country, no backup? That's not bravery. That's just arithmetic. Thanks for the confidence. I'm not here to lie to you. I'm here to tell you I can turn terrible odds into merely bad ones." He held out his hand. Take it or don't. But decide fast. Every day you wait is another day Colton's men are spreading rumors about the crazy girl who thinks she can run a ranch. Arden looked at his outstretched hand. She thought about her father's letter, about Grissom's smug certainty, about Warren Colton sitting in his enormous house assuming she'd fold. She shook Rowan's hand. His grip was firm, calloused, real. 50-50 split, she said, and I'm not crazy. Didn't say you were. I said that's what they're calling you. What do you call me? Rowan smiled for the first time, brief, almost hidden. Hasn't been decided yet. They started before dawn. Arden had learned long ago that sleep was a luxury the frontier didn't often provide. She'd been awake since midnight, running through supply lists and trying to figure out how to move 200 cattle with 2 people in 5 days' notice. Rowan appeared at her door just as the sky started to lighten, carrying a worn saddle and a rifle that had seen better days but was clearly well maintained. Coffee? She offered. Please. They sat on the porch in silence while the ranch woke up around them. Arden watched him drink. He didn't make small talk, didn't fill the quiet with nervous words. He just drank his coffee and watched the horizon like he was reading something written there. Tell me what you're thinking, he said finally. Arden pulled out her father's map, spreading it across the porch boards. Prescott Valley. 6 days' drive if nothing goes wrong. I've got enough supplies for 8 days, accounting for delays. We'll need to push the herd hard, 15 miles a day minimum. That's fast for a herd this size. It's necessary. The bank won't give me an extension, and Colton sure as hell isn't going to make this easy. Rowan studied the map, tracing the route with one finger. This section here, through Devil's Canyon. That's where you'll lose them if you're not careful. Narrow pass, rocky ground, easy to spook. I know. My father drove through there twice. Said it was manageable if you took it slow. Slow is what we don't have. I'm aware. Rowan looked up at her, and she saw him making calculations, not about the trail but about her, testing whether she understood what she was proposing. I need to know you can do this, he said. Not because you're a woman, because you're one person trying to do the work of 6, with no room for mistakes. Can you? Most men phrased that question differently. They asked if she was sure, if she'd really thought it through, if she understood how hard it would be. They made it sound like concern when it was really doubt. Rowan just asked the question straight. I've been working this ranch since I was 14, Arden said. I can ride, shoot, rope, and brand as well as any man my father ever hired. Better than most. I know how to read weather, how to spot a sick animal, how to find water where there shouldn't be any. What I don't know is how to manage a full drive alone. That's why you're here. Fair enough. He folded the map. We'll need to cut the herd. 200 is too many for 2 riders. No. Arden, no. I need every head to make the numbers work. Anything less, and I won't clear the debt. You also won't make it if we're overwhelmed on day 2. Then we don't get overwhelmed. Rowan's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue further. Instead, he stood and walked to the edge of the porch, looking out at the herd. We'll need to pack light, 1 spare horse each, minimal supplies. And we move at night when we can. Cattle are calmer, and we'll make better time. Agreed. And if Colton sends men to interfere? Arden's hand drifted to her revolver. Then I guess we'll find out how serious they are about stopping me. Warren Colton sent men that afternoon. Arden was in the barn, sorting tack and checking supplies, when she heard horses approaching. 3 riders, moving with the casual arrogance of men who believed themselves untouchable. She recognized the leader, Ned Palmer, Colton's foreman, a thick-shouldered man with a face like a clenched fist, and a reputation for solving his boss's problems with violence when persuasion failed. Rowan materialized beside her, rifle in hand. Friends of yours? Opposite. Palmer dismounted without waiting for an invitation, his men flanking him. Miss Vale? Heard you were planning something foolish. Funny. I heard you were planning to mind your own business. Mr. Colton is concerned about you, says you've rejected his generous offer to buy your cattle. His offer wasn't generous, it was insulting. Times are hard. Prices are down. He's doing you a favor. Arden stepped out of the barn, and Palmer's eyes flickered to Rowan, then back to her. Tell Mr. Colton I don't need his favors. I'll sell my herd where I choose. See, that's the thing. Palmer's smile had no warmth in it. Roads can be dangerous, things happen, herds scatter, accidents occur. Mr. Colton would hate to see you lose everything because you were too proud to accept help. That a threat? That's a fact. This territory doesn't forgive mistakes, especially from people trying to do things they're not equipped for. Rowan shifted slightly, a subtle movement that somehow made Palmer's men straighten. She seems equipped to me. Palmer looked at him properly for the first time. Who the hell are you? Someone who doesn't work for Colton. You're making a mistake, friend. Whatever she's paying you, it's not worth crossing Mr. Colton. I don't recall being friends with you, and she's not paying me to be smart. She's paying me to move cattle. The tension pulled tight enough to snap. Arden saw Palmer's hand drift toward his gun, saw his men preparing to back whatever play he made. This could go bad fast, 3 against 2, with her ranch hands long gone and no witnesses if someone decided violence was easier than persuasion. She stepped forward, putting herself between Palmer and Rowan. You've delivered your message, now get off my land. Arden, I said get off my land. You want to stop me? Do it legally. Send the sheriff, get a court order. But don't come here making vague threats and expecting me to fold because I'm scared of Warren Colton. She let her hand rest on her revolver. I've got work to do, and you're wasting my time. Palmer stared at her for a long moment, then laughed, sharp and mean. Your daddy should have taught you when to quit. Might have lived longer. The words hit like a punch, but Arden didn't flinch. My father taught me plenty, including that men like Colton only win when good people give up. I'm not giving up. Then you're as stupid as he was. Maybe. But at least I can sleep at night. Palmer mounted his horse, his men following suit. Before riding off, he leaned down, voice low enough that only Arden could hear. 5 days from now, you're going to wish you'd taken the deal. Remember that. They rode away, dust rising behind them like a threat made physical. Rowan waited until they were out of sight before speaking. That's going to be a problem. Everything's a problem. We deal with it. He's right about one thing. Colton can make the trail dangerous. Men following us, spooking the herd, causing delays we can't afford. Arden turned back to the barn, her hands shaking with anger she wouldn't let Palmer see. Then we move faster than they expect. We leave tonight instead of tomorrow. Give ourselves an extra day. The herd's not ready. Then we make them ready. Everything else can wait. Rowan studied her face, and she wondered what he saw. Desperation, determination, maybe both. You know this is going to get worse before it gets better. I know. And you're still going through with it? Arden thought about her father's grave, fresh dirt not yet settled. Thought about Grissom's smug certainty and Palmer's threats. Thought about every person in Dry Hollow who'd looked at her like she was already defeated. I don't have another choice, she said. This ranch is all I have. All my father left me. I'm not letting them take it because they think I'm too weak to fight back. Rowan nodded slowly, like he'd been waiting to hear exactly that. All right then, let's get to work. They worked through the afternoon and into the evening, moving with the focused intensity of people racing a clock they couldn't see. Rowan proved himself immediately. He handled cattle with the easy confidence of someone who'd spent years learning their rhythms and moods. He didn't force them, didn't fight them. He just moved, and they moved with him. Arden watched him work and felt something loosen in her chest. For the first time since her father died, she wasn't alone in this. By sunset, they had the herd gathered and ready. 200 head of cattle, each one representing a gamble she couldn't afford to lose. Rowan checked their spare horses while Arden did a final inventory of supplies. We're short on medical supplies, she said, reading from her list. Can't be helped. We use what we have. And if someone gets hurt, then we hope it's not serious. Rowan finished with the horses and walked over to where she stood. Stop looking for problems we can solve later. Right now, we need to move. I'm just being thorough, I know, but there's thorough and there's paralysis. We're as ready as we're going to be. Arden looked at him, at this stranger who'd appeared exactly when she needed him most, offering help that seemed too convenient to trust. Why are you really here? The truth. Rowan was quiet for a long moment, his face unreadable in the fading light. I knew your father, not well. Met him once, maybe 5 years back. He was moving a herd through Texas, and his crew had quit on him halfway through. I helped him finish the drive. He paused. He talked about you the whole time. Said you were smarter and tougher than anyone gave you credit for. Said someday you'd show them all. Arden's throat tightened. He never mentioned you. No reason he would. It was one drive years ago. But when I heard what happened, that he died and left you fighting alone, I figured I owed him. You don't owe us anything. Maybe not. But I'm here anyway. Rowan met her eyes. Your father was right, by the way. You are tougher than anyone gives you credit for. Question is whether you're tough enough for what comes next. Guess we'll find out. They mounted their horses as the last light faded from the sky. The herd stirred, sensing movement, sensing change. Arden took point, Rowan flanking, and together they started the slow, careful work of turning 200 cattle north toward a future neither of them could guarantee. Behind them, Dry Hollow settled into darkness. Ahead the trail waited, 6 days of hard country, bad odds, and people determined to see her fail. Arden didn't look back. She never did. The first night on the trail taught Arden that desperation had a rhythm, steady, relentless, impossible to ignore. They pushed the herd through darkness, the cattle moving in a slow river of sound and smell that filled the desert air, hooves on hard ground, the occasional low call of a steer, the creak of leather and the jingle of tack. It all blended into something almost hypnotic, and Arden found herself counting time in breaths instead of hours. Rowan rode the left flank while she took the right, their positions creating a loose corridor that kept the herd together without forcing them. Every few minutes, one of them would ride forward to check the lead animals, making sure they stayed on course and didn't slow to graze. Around midnight, Rowan circled back to ride alongside her. How far have we come? Arden asked. Maybe 8 miles. Not bad for a night start. Not good enough either. It's what we've got. He gestured ahead where the trail started to climb into rougher country. We'll need to rest them before dawn. Push through the day, rest again tomorrow night. That's too slow. That's realistic. You kill them with exhaustion, and none of this matters. Arden wanted to argue, but the weight of his experience pressed against her panic. He was right. She knew he was right. But right didn't feel like enough when every hour brought her closer to losing everything. They found a shallow canyon just before dawn, wide enough to hold the herd with steep walls that would keep them contained. The cattle settled quickly, exhausted from the night's movement. Arden dismounted, her legs cramping after hours in the saddle, and immediately started checking the animals for injuries. You need to rest, Rowan said. I need to make sure we didn't lose any. I already did a count. We're at full numbers. I want to check myself. Rowan caught her arm as she tried to walk past him. Arden, stop. She pulled away, anger flaring. Don't tell me to stop. I know what I'm doing. I know you do. That's not the point. His voice was level, patient in a way that somehow made her angrier. You're running on fear and coffee. That'll get you through today, maybe tomorrow. But we've got 6 days of this, and if you burn yourself out in the first 2, I can't run this drive alone. I'm fine. You're not. And that's not weakness. That's just fact. Sit down. Eat something. Let yourself breathe for 10 minutes. Arden wanted to fight him on it, but her body betrayed her. The moment she stopped moving, exhaustion hit like a physical weight. Her hands were shaking. Her vision blurred at the edges. When had she last eaten? Yesterday morning? The day before? She sat down hard on a flat rock, and Rowan handed her jerky and hardtack from their supplies. Eat, he said. All of it, then sleep for 2 hours. I'll keep watch. 2 hours is non-negotiable. I can't do this if you can't do this, and you can't do this if you don't rest. Arden ate mechanically, her jaw working through dried meat that tasted like dust and salt. Around them, the canyon was quiet except for the settling sounds of the herd. The sky was starting to lighten in the east, turning from black to deep purple. Tell me about Colton, Rowan said, settling down a few feet away with his rifle across his knees. What about him? Why he wants your land specifically? There's plenty of territory out here. Why target your father? Arden washed down the last of the jerky with water from her canteen. Our ranch sits on the best water source for 50 miles. 3 natural springs, year-round flow. Colton's land is bigger, but half of it's useless without reliable water. He's been trying to buy us out for years. Your father refused, every time. Said it was principle, that men like Colton already have too much and always want more. He thought if he could hold on long enough, prove that a small operation could survive, maybe others would too. How'd that work out? The bitterness in her own laugh surprised her. He's dead and I'm running cattle through the desert at night with a stranger, trying to save a ranch that's probably already lost, so not great. Rowan was quiet for a moment. He wasn't wrong, though, about Colton. Men like that don't stop. They just find new ways to take. You sound like you've met him before. I've met plenty like him. Different names, same story. They see something they want, and they convince themselves they deserve it more than whoever has it. He checked the rifle's action, a habitual movement. Your father fought back. That's more than most do. And it killed him. Maybe. Or maybe watching Colton win would have killed him faster. Rowan looked at her directly. Some people aren't built to surrender. Sounds like your father was one of them. Sounds like you are too. Arden didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. She finished her water, checked her revolver out of habit, and then lay back against her saddle. The ground was hard and the sky too bright for real sleep, but her body didn't care. Within minutes, exhaustion dragged her under. She dreamed of her father's funeral. In the dream, the whole town was there, but they weren't mourning. They were waiting, watching to see if she would break. And when she looked down at the grave, it wasn't her father's name on the marker. It was hers. She woke 2 hours later to Rowan's hand on her shoulder and the sun already climbing toward noon. Time to move, he said. The herd was restless, ready to graze, but Rowan had kept them together through sheer persistence and patience. Arden mounted up, her body protesting every movement, and together they started pushing the cattle north again. The day was brutal. The Arizona sun turned the canyon into an oven, and the cattle slowed to a crawl despite their urging. Twice, Arden had to ride ahead to scout for water, following dry creek beds until she found enough to let the animals drink. Each stop cost them time they didn't have. Around mid-afternoon, Rowan rode up beside her, his face grim. "We've got company." Arden followed his gaze and saw them, 3 riders on a ridge about a half-mile back, just visible against the skyline. They weren't trying to hide. They wanted to be seen. "Colton's men?" she asked. "Most likely. They've been following us since we left the canyon." "How long?" "Hour, maybe 2. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because there was nothing to do about it sooner. Now we need to decide what we're doing about it now." Arden's hand drifted to her revolver, but Rowan shook his head. "That's not the play." "Not yet. They're watching, trying to rattle us. If we engage, we're playing their game. So what do we do?" "Keep moving. Stay alert. Don't give them an opening to claim we were aggressive." He paused. "But if they come at the herd, all bets are off." They pushed on, and the riders kept pace, always just visible, always just out of reach. It was worse than an attack, this constant pressure, this reminder that someone was watching, waiting for a mistake. By evening, Arden's nerves were scraped raw. The riders hadn't come closer, but they hadn't left either. They were a shadow, a promise of trouble to come. They made camp in a narrow valley with good sight lines, the herd bedded down and restless. Rowan built a small fire while Arden did another count. Still 200 head, no losses yet. "They'll come tonight," Rowan said, not looking up from the fire. "You sure?" "I'm sure they'll try something. Whether it's tonight or tomorrow doesn't matter much. They want us scared and sloppy." "I'm not scared." Rowan glanced at her, and she saw something like approval in his expression. "Good. Fear makes you stupid. But don't be overconfident either. There's 3 of them and 2 of us, and they have the advantage of choosing when and where." Arden sat down across the fire from him, close enough to feel its warmth, but not so close it blinded her to the darkness beyond. "You think they'll go for the herd or for us?" "Herd. Scatter them, and we can't recover in time to make the deadline. That's Colton's play, delay us without directly attacking us." "So we don't sleep. We take turns, 2-hour watches. Whoever's resting stays armed and stays ready." They ate in silence. More jerky, some beans Rowan heated over the fire, coffee that was more bitterness than flavor. Normal food would have tasted better, but normal was something neither of them had the luxury of expecting. Arden took the first watch. Rowan stretched out near the fire, his rifle within arm's reach, and was asleep within minutes. She envied that, the ability to shut down and rest even when danger was circling. Her father had been the same way. He used to say that worry was just fear doing overtime, and fear never solved anything. She wondered what he would think of her now, sitting in the dark with a stranger, betting everything on a drive that might already be doomed. Would he be proud? Or would he see this as the stubbornness that had killed him playing out again in her? The attack came at 2 a.m. Arden heard it before she saw it, a sudden rush of movement from the south side of the herd, shouts designed to spook the cattle. She was on her feet and shouting for Rowan before her conscious mind caught up. The herd exploded into motion, panicked animals trying to scatter in every direction at once. Arden swung into her saddle and rode hard for the leading edge, firing her revolver into the air to turn them. Behind her, she heard Rowan doing the same on the other flank. 3 riders emerged from the darkness, circling the herd, driving them toward the canyon walls where they'd break and scatter into terrain too rough to follow in the dark. "Cut them off!" Rowan shouted, already spurring his horse toward the nearest rider. Arden didn't think. She rode straight at the lead rider, her horse's hooves throwing sparks off the rocks. The man saw her coming and tried to swerve, but she was faster. She cut across his path, forcing him to pull up hard or risk a collision. "Back off!" she screamed, her revolver pointed at his chest. The man's face was hidden in shadow, but she heard him laugh. "You gonna shoot me, girl? Over a few cows?" "Over my life, same thing. So yeah, I'll shoot you." He studied her for a long moment, and she saw the calculation in his posture, weighing whether she meant it, whether she could do it. She thumbed back the hammer, the sound sharp and final in the chaos. The man wheeled his horse and rode back into the darkness, shouting something to his companions. Within seconds, all 3 riders were gone, vanished as quickly as they'd appeared. The herd was still panicked, still trying to scatter, but without the riders pushing them, Rowan and Arden were able to slowly work them back together. It took an hour of hard riding, constant pressure, and voices hoarse from shouting, but eventually the cattle settled into an uneasy cluster. Arden dismounted on shaking legs and did a quick count by moonlight. 198, she said, her voice raw. "We lost 2. Rowan rode up beside her, his face smudged with dust and sweat. "Could have been worse. Could have been better." "You did good. That rider was going to scatter them into the canyon. You stopped him." "I threatened to shoot him." "And he believed you. That's what mattered." Rowan dismounted and checked his own horse, running his hands along its legs to check for injuries. "They'll be back." "I know. And next time they might not back off." "I know that too." Arden looked at him across the darkness. "Would you have?" "Backed off, I mean. Motom. If someone pointed a gun at me over something I was being paid to do? Yeah. I'm not dying for Warren Colton's land grab. But not everyone thinks that way. Some men take a threat as a challenge. Then I guess we'll see what kind of men Colton hired." They didn't sleep the rest of that night. They took turns dozing in the saddle while keeping the herd together, both of them watching for another attack that never came. By the time the sun rose, Arden felt like she'd been awake for days. Everything hurt. Her back, her legs, her hands from gripping the reins too tight for too long. But they were moving. 2 cattle short, 1 day down, but still moving. The second day was worse than the first. The heat climbed past endurance, and the cattle slowed to a crawl despite every effort to push them. Arden found herself riding in a haze of exhaustion and sun glare, her thoughts slipping sideways into memories and half-dreams. She remembered being 12, riding with her father to check fence lines. He'd taught her to read the land, how to spot water from the way vegetation clustered, how to tell good grazing from poor by the color of the grass, how to sense weather changes and the way the wind moved. "Land tells you everything if you listen," he'd said. Most people don't listen. They just take and take until there's nothing left. Osol, she'd asked him why he didn't do that, why he didn't expand like Colton, didn't buy up more territory while he could. "Because taking more than you need is just another word for stealing," he'd replied. "And I'm no thief." Arden pulled herself back to the present, blinking away the memory. Her father's principles had been admirable. They'd also left her here, alone except for a stranger, fighting a battle she might not win. Rowan called a halt around noon, finding shade under an overhang of rock where they could rest the herd through the worst heat. Arden slid from her saddle and immediately sat down, her legs giving out. "How far?" she asked. Rowan checked their position against the map. "Maybe 30 miles from where we started. We need to average 35 a day to make the deadline. We're behind." "I know we're behind. I'm not criticizing. I'm stating facts. We need to make up time tonight, which means pushing them harder than we should. That's going to cost us in other ways. Injured animals, exhaustion, mistakes. You have a better plan? No, just making sure you understand the trade we're making. Arden closed her eyes, feeling the sun's heat pressing down even in the shade. Everything's a trade. Every choice costs something. I get it. Do you? Rowan sat down across from her, close enough to talk without shouting. Because I need to know you're not going to break when things get worse. They're already worse. They're going to get worse than this. Colton's men will come back. We'll hit rough terrain. Something will go wrong that we can't predict or prepare for. And when that happens, I need to know you're not going to fold. Arden opened her eyes and looked at him. Really looked. He wasn't challenging her. He was asking a genuine question. The kind of question you ask a partner before you step into something dangerous together. I've been folding my whole life, she said quietly. Folding when my father got sick because he needed me to be strong. Folding when the bank came after us because fighting felt impossible. Folding when every hand quit because I didn't have the money to keep them. She paused. I'm done folding. Whatever comes next, I'm facing it. If that means I break, then I break. But I'm not quitting. Rowan held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. All right then. They rested for 3 hours, taking turns keeping watch while the others slept fitfully in the shade. When they started moving again, the sun was still brutal, but the worst heat had passed. The herd moved reluctantly, and Arden didn't blame them. They were being pushed past what was reasonable, past what was safe, because time had become more valuable than caution. As evening approached, they crossed into territory Arden had never seen before. The land changed, becoming rockier, with strange formations that looked like giant fingers reaching toward the sky. The trail narrowed, forcing them to string the herd out in a longer line, making it harder to manage. This is where it gets dangerous, Rowan said, riding up beside her. Devil's Canyon is just ahead. We'll have to take them through in the dark. Can't we wait until morning? And lose another 12 hours? We're already behind, remember? Arden looked ahead at the narrow passage between two towering rock walls. Even in daylight, it would be treacherous. At night, with a tired herd and no backup, it was borderline suicidal. All right, she said. We go through. They approached the canyon entrance as the last light faded. The walls rose on either side, close enough that Arden could almost touch both sides if she stretched out her arms. The cattle bunched up, nervous about the confined space, and it took constant pressure to keep them moving forward. The sound changed inside the canyon. Every hoof strike, every call echoed and amplified until it felt like the walls themselves were closing in. Arden's horse didn't like it either, ears pinned back, nostrils flaring. She kept one hand on the reins and the other on her revolver, some instinct telling her that danger was close even if she couldn't see it. They were halfway through when the rocks started falling. Small ones at first, pebbles and gravel that rattled down from above. Then larger stones bouncing off the canyon walls with sharp cracks that spooked the cattle. Arden looked up and saw movement on the rim, shadows against stars, men deliberately kicking rocks down into the canyon. Stampede! Rowan shouted. They're trying to start a stampede. The herd panicked. 200 cattle in a space barely wide enough for 10, all of them trying to run at once. Arden's horse reared as animals pressed in from all sides, their eyes rolling white with fear. She fired into the air, trying to break the momentum, but the echo was deafening, making everything worse. A steer slammed into her horse's shoulder, nearly knocking them both down. She grabbed the saddle horn and held on, steering more by instinct than sight. Somewhere ahead, Rowan was shouting, trying to turn the lead animals before they crashed into the canyon's dead end. Arden couldn't see him through the mass of bodies and dust, couldn't see anything except chaos and the narrow slice of sky above. A rock the size of her fist hit her shoulder and pain exploded down her arm. She bit back a scream and kept riding, kept pushing, because stopping meant getting trampled. Another rock hit her horse's flank, and the animal lunged forward, carrying her deeper into the press of cattle. Then, impossibly, the pressure eased. The canyon widened just enough to let the herd spread out, and the animal's panic burned itself out into exhausted milling. Arden fought her way to the front and found Rowan, blood streaming down the side of his face from a cut above his eye. "You all right?" he asked. "No? You?" "Same." He wiped blood from his eye with his sleeve. "They're gone. Heard them ride off while we were in the thick of it." Arden looked back at the canyon, at the cattle still settling, still nervous. How many did we lose? They did a count that took 30 minutes and left them both silent with anger and exhaustion. 183 head. They'd lost 17 in the canyon. We can't make the numbers work with this few, Arden said, her voice flat. Even if we sell them all, it won't be enough to clear the debt. Rowan didn't answer right away. He was looking back the way they'd come, his jaw tight. We keep going. Rowan, we keep going. Maybe we find better buyers in Prescott. Maybe we negotiate with the bank. Maybe something breaks our way for once. But we don't quit in the middle of a canyon with Colton's men celebrating on the ridge. He finally looked at her. You said you were done folding. Were you lying? Arden wanted to scream at him, wanted to cry, wanted to turn around and ride back to Dry Hollow and tell Warren Colton he'd won. But she thought about her father's letter in her pocket, about Palmer's threats, about every person who'd assumed she'd fail. No, she said. I wasn't lying. Then we move. Now. Before they come back to finish the job. They pushed the remaining cattle through the rest of the canyon and out into open country beyond. The night stretched out around them, vast and indifferent to their struggle. Arden's shoulder throbbed where the rock had hit, and every movement sent pain radiating down her arm. But she kept riding. 4 days left. 183 cattle. Impossible odds getting more impossible by the hour. The Arizona night was cold after the day's heat, and Arden shivered in her saddle, exhaustion and pain making her clumsy. Rowan rode beside her in silence, his face a mask of concentration and controlled anger. They made camp in a small valley just before dawn, both of them too tired to do more than basic care for the horses and a quick check of the herd. Arden tried to build a fire and fumbled the matches twice before Rowan took them from her hands. Sleep, he said. I'll take first watch. Your head will be fine. Sleep, Arden. She wanted to argue, but her body made the decision for her. She lay down on her bedroll and was unconscious before she could form another protest. This time, she didn't dream at all. When Arden woke, the sun was already high and Rowan was gone. She sat up too fast, pain shooting through her bruised shoulder, and grabbed for her revolver. The herd was still there, grazing quietly in the valley. The horses were picketed nearby. No signs of trouble, but Rowan's bedroll was empty, his rifle missing. She was pulling on her boots when she heard the gunshot, single crack, distant but clear, coming from the ridge to the north. Arden was mounted and riding before conscious thought caught up with instinct, her horse climbing the rocky slope toward the sound. Her shoulder screamed with every jolt, but she didn't slow down. She found Rowan at the top of the ridge, rifle lowered, standing over a dead rattlesnake the size of her forearm. You couldn't have woken me up before wandering off to get yourself killed? The words came out sharper than she meant, fear converting instantly to anger. Rowan looked at her, then back at the snake. Was checking the trail ahead. Snake had other ideas about who owned this rock. He nudged it with his boot. Big bastard. Would have been a problem if I'd stepped on it in the dark. Arden's heart was still hammering. Next time, wake me up. We're supposed to be watching each other's backs. You needed the sleep more than I needed company. He picked up the dead snake by its tail, examining it with the detached interest of someone who'd killed dozens before. Besides, I found something while you were out. What? Rowan pointed north, where the valley opened into flatter country. Water. A good creek, maybe 3 miles from here. Enough to let the herd drink their fill and rest through the heat. We could make up some time if we push hard tonight. 3 days left, Arden said, more to herself than him. We need to cover almost 70 miles. I know the math. Question is whether the cattle can handle it. She looked down at the herd scattered across the valley floor. From up here, they looked small, insignificant. Hard to believe her entire future was tied to those 183 animals. They'll have to handle it. We all will. Rowan studied her face, and she saw concern there mixed with something else. Maybe respect. Maybe just exhaustion making them both see things that weren't really there. Your shoulder. Let me look at it. It's fine. It's not. You're holding yourself wrong. If it's bad, I need to know now, not when we're in the middle of another crisis. Arden wanted to argue, but he was right. She dismounted and pulled off her jacket, gritting her teeth against the pain. Her shirt was torn where the rock had hit, the skin beneath already turning purple and yellow. Rowan's jaw tightened when he saw it. That should be wrapped. You might have cracked something. Can I still ride? Can you? Yeah. Should you? That's different. Those are the same question out here. She started to pull her jacket back on and hissed as the movement sent fresh pain radiating down her arm. Rowan caught the jacket before she could struggle into it. Wait! He dug through his saddlebag and came out with a strip of cloth that might have been clean once. This isn't going to feel good. He was right. Wrapping her shoulder and ribs made her vision white out at the edges, and she had to bite her tongue to keep from making noise. But when he finished, the pressure helped. Not much, but enough. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me yet. We've still got 3 days of hell ahead of us. He handed her canteen back. Drink. Then we move the herd to that creek and figure out our next play. They worked the cattle north through the morning, and the animals seemed to sense the water ahead. They moved faster, with more purpose, and by noon the herd was strung out along a decent creek with clear water running over smooth stones. Arden let them drink and graze while she and Rowan scouted ahead. The country was changing again. The rocks gave way to scrubland, then to rolling hills covered in sage and tough grass. It was easier terrain, which should have been a relief, but Arden found herself watching for riders on every ridge, expecting another attack. They're going to come at us again, she said. Not really a question. Rowan nodded. Probably tonight or tomorrow. We cost them in the canyon, showed we won't just roll over. Men like that, they take it personal. So what do? We don't give them another chance to scatter the herd. We stay tight, keep moving, and if they come at us direct, we make them regret it. You mean shoot them? If it comes to that? He looked at her. Could you? If you had to? Arden thought about Palmer's threats, about men kicking rocks down on them in the canyon, about her father dying while Colton's network of influence slowly strangled everything he'd built. Yeah, I could. Don't say it if you don't mean it. Hesitation will get you killed faster than anything else out here. I mean it. And she did. The realization didn't scare her as much as it probably should have. Maybe she was too tired to be scared. Or maybe she'd finally crossed some line her father had tried to keep her from, the place where survival mattered more than principles. They pushed through the afternoon, covering ground faster than they had since leaving Dry Hollow. The cattle were rested and the terrain cooperated, and for a few hours Arden let herself believe they might actually make it. Then the storm clouds started building on the western horizon. That's going to be bad, Rowan said, watching the sky. Arden had grown up reading frontier weather, and she knew he was right. The clouds were the wrong color, moving the wrong way. This wasn't a passing squall. This was something that would hit hard and stay. How long do we have? Few hours, maybe less. He scanned the surrounding country, looking for shelter they both knew wasn't there. We need to find some kind of protection. If lightning hits near the herd, they'll stampede worse than the canyon. They pushed harder, driving the cattle toward a cluster of low hills that might provide some windbreak. But the storm moved faster than they did, catching them in open country with nowhere to hide. The first drops hit like thrown stones, cold and hard. And within minutes the rain was a solid wall of water that made it impossible to see more than a few yards. Thunder cracked overhead. So close Arden felt it in her chest. Her horse shied, and she fought to keep control while trying to see the herd through the downpour. Lightning split the sky, briefly illuminating a scene of complete chaos. Cattle running in every direction, Rowan somewhere on the far side trying to turn them, rain so thick it was like riding underwater. Another lightning strike, closer this time, hitting a dead tree 50 yards away. The tree exploded and the herd lost whatever fragile cohesion they'd maintained. Full stampede now, animals running blind with terror. And Arden knew if she didn't stop them in the next few minutes, they'd scatter across miles of territory they'd never recover in time. She spurred her horse forward, riding straight into the mass of running cattle. Insane, suicidal. But she couldn't think of another option. She fired her revolver, not at the animals, but ahead of them, trying to create a barrier of sound that would turn the leaders. A steer clipped her horse's shoulder and they both went down. Arden hit the ground hard, her injured shoulder taking the impact. For a second she couldn't breathe, couldn't move, could only watch as hooves pounded the mud inches from her face. Then Rowan was there, grabbing her jacket and hauling her up, half dragging her out of the path of the stampede. You trying to die? he shouted over the thunder. She couldn't answer, still fighting for breath. He pushed her toward her horse, which had somehow stayed close, and she managed to get back in the saddle despite hands that wouldn't stop shaking. "We have to turn them," she yelled. "They're already turning. See? They're circling back on themselves." He was right. The herd's momentum was breaking, exhaustion and confusion slowing them down. Another few minutes of hard work, and they had the cattle milling in a loose group, no longer running but too agitated to settle. The storm raged for another hour, rain turning the ground into mud that sucked at the horses' hooves and made every step treacherous. By the time it finally passed, both Arden and Rowan were soaked through, shivering, and barely able to stay in their saddles. "Count," Arden said through chattering teeth. "It's too dark. We'll count at first light." "I need to know now." Rowan looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her face stopped him. They did a rough count by feel more than sight, riding among the cattle in the darkness, trying to estimate numbers that kept shifting. 170, maybe 175. At least 8 more lost, possibly 13. Arden dismounted and stood in the mud, rain still dripping from her hat, and felt something break inside her. Not completely, not enough to stop, but enough to know she was running on fumes and willpower and not much else. "We need to rest," Rowan said quietly. "We need to move." "Arden, I said we need to move." Her voice cracked. "Every hour we lose, every animal we lose, it gets more impossible. I can do the math, Rowan. Even if we make it to Prescott now, even if we sell every head at top price, it might not be enough. So what's the alternative? Kill ourselves trying?" "The alternative is giving up, and I'm not doing that." "Then we compromise. We rest for 2 hours, let the horses recover, let ourselves recover. Then we push through what's left of the night. If we make good time, we can be in Prescott by tomorrow evening." That's cutting it close. Everything about this is cutting it close. That doesn't change by pretending we're not exhausted. He grabbed her good shoulder, forcing her to look at him. "Your father wouldn't want you dead over this ranch. You know that. My father's dead because of this ranch, because he wouldn't quit even when it was killing him. So maybe I'm just following his example. Or maybe you're smarter than he was. Smart enough to know that you can't save anything if you're dead." Arden pulled away from him, anger and grief and exhaustion all tangled together into something she couldn't name. "You don't understand." "I understand plenty. I understand you're trying to prove something to a town full of people who already made up their minds about you. I understand you think if you just push hard enough, sacrifice enough, you'll somehow earn their respect. But here's the truth. You could drive this herd to Prescott and back, could save the ranch twice over, and half those people still won't see you as anything but a woman who got lucky." The words hit like a slap. "Then why are you here, if it's all so pointless?" "Because it's not pointless to you, and because I knew your father, and he asked me once what kind of man I wanted to be. This is part of my answer." Rowan's voice softened. "But that doesn't mean I'm going to stand here and watch you kill yourself because you think that's what strength looks like." Arden wanted to fight him on it, wanted to prove she could keep going, but her body betrayed her. Her legs were shaking. Her vision kept blurring at the edges. She was so cold she couldn't feel her fingers. 2 hours, she said finally. "Then we move." "Deal." They made camp in the lee of a small ridge, building a fire that sputtered and smoked in the wet wood, but eventually caught. Arden stripped off her wet jacket and immediately regretted it. The cold was worse without it, even near the fire. Rowan threw her a dry blanket from his pack, and she wrapped it around herself while her teeth chattered. "How's the shoulder?" he asked. "Been better." "Can I look?" She nodded, too tired to argue. He unwrapped the bandage, and even in the firelight, she could see the bruising had spread. The whole right side of her torso was a mess of purple and yellow and black. "That needs proper medical attention," Rowan said. "I'll get it in Prescott. If we make it to Prescott." "We'll make it." He didn't argue, just rewrapped the bandage with careful hands. When he finished, he sat back and stared into the fire. "Tell me something about your father, something good." The question surprised her. "Why?" "Because I only knew him for one drive, and you knew him your whole life. Seems like you should get to decide what parts of him matter right now." Arden pulled the blanket tighter and thought about it. So many memories, most of them tangled up with work and worry and the slow grind of keeping the ranch alive. But there were good ones too, if she looked past the recent years. When I was 10, a wildfire came through about 20 miles from our ranch. Burned for 3 days, destroyed 2 other properties. Everyone thought we'd lose everything. The wind was blowing straight at us. She paused, remembering. My father spent 2 days building fire breaks and wetting down the buildings. Then he did something nobody expected. He started a backfire, deliberately burning a strip of our own land to create a gap the wildfire couldn't cross. Did it work? Yeah, but it cost us 50 acres of good grazing land and scared me half to death watching him work right at the edge of the flames. Afterward, I asked him why he did it, why he burned our own land. He said sometimes you have to destroy something to save it. That protecting what matters means making hard choices nobody else will understand. Rowan nodded slowly. Sounds like him, sounds like you too. I'm not sure that's a compliment. It's an observation. Whether it's a compliment depends on whether you survive what comes next. They fell silent after that, both staring into the fire while the night pressed in around them. Arden dozed off, still sitting up, and woke to Rowan shaking her shoulder gently. Time to move. She stood, everything hurting, and got back on her horse through sheer determination. The herd was restless but manageable, and they pushed north into darkness that felt heavier than before. The storm had passed, but it left behind cold that settled into bones and wouldn't leave. They made decent time through the night, the cattle seemingly as eager as they were to be done with this journey. As dawn broke, Arden saw buildings on the horizon, the outskirts of Prescott Valley. We made it, she said, not quite believing it. We made it here. Still gotta sell them. Rowan pointed toward the railhead visible in the distance. And we've got maybe 6 hours before your deadline runs out. Arden checked the angle of the sun, doing the math. If they pushed straight through, got the cattle to the yards, found a buyer immediately, and negotiated fast, they might have enough time to get payment back to Dry Hollow before the bank came for the ranch. It was the longest of long shots, but it was what they had. They drove the herd through the main street of Prescott, drawing stares from early risers who probably didn't see full cattle drives come through town every day. The yards were at the north end, a sprawling complex of pens and loading chutes that smelled like livestock and money. A man in a vest and clean hat emerged from the office building, clipboard in hand. Help you folks? Looking to sell, Arden said, dismounting. 170 head, good stock, ready to load today. The man looked into the cattle, then at her, then at Rowan. Where'd you drive from? Dry Hollow, South Territory. That's a hard drive. Lose many? Some. The ones that made it are solid. He walked among the cattle, running expert eyes over them, occasionally checking teeth or feeling along legs. Arden forced herself to stand still, to not fidget, to look like someone who did this all the time, instead of someone betting everything on one desperate sale. Finally, the man came back. I can give you $18 a head. Arden's stomach dropped. That was half what they were worth. These are $25 cattle minimum. You know it, and I know it. Maybe in a normal market, but I've got pens full already, and your herd's been pushed hard. I can see it. Some of them won't be fit for loading for days. He shrugged. 18 is my offer. Take it or don't. We'll find another buyer. Good luck. Most operations around here work with me. You might find someone willing to go higher, but you'll waste time doing it. He checked his pocket watch. How much time you got? Arden wanted to punch him. Instead, she said, 22. That's my counter. 20. 21, and we load them ourselves. The man considered, then nodded. Done. I'll have the paperwork ready in an hour. You'll get payment on completion of loading. Arden did the math in her head. $21 times 170 head. $3,570. Less than a third of what she owed the bank. Not even close to enough. Rowan must have seen it on her face because he stepped in smoothly. We'll take it. Where do you want them? They spent the next 3 hours loading cattle, working with pen hands who were efficient but not particularly gentle. By the time the last animal was loaded, Arden was running on nothing but stubbornness and the refusal to collapse in front of strangers. The buyer came out with payment, cash in a leather pouch that felt impossibly light for 3 months of desperation. Pleasure doing business. You folks need anything else? Information, Arden said. Anyone in town buying larger herds, someone who might pay better prices? There's a big buyer came through yesterday. Tall fellow, well-dressed, buying up everything he could get. Paid top dollar, too. Think his name was Colton. The world tilted sideways. Warren Colton? That's the one. You know him? Arden didn't answer. She walked away from the yards, away from Rowan's concerned look, and stood in the street trying to process what she'd just heard. Colton was here, had been here yesterday, had probably bought up available cattle specifically to drive down the price she'd get, to make sure even if she succeeded in the drive, she'd fail at the sale. This whole thing had been rigged from the start. Rowan found her sitting on the steps of a general store, staring at nothing. He sat down beside her without speaking. He won, she said quietly. Colton won. Even if I make it back to Dry Hollow, even if I pay the bank everything I just made, it won't be enough. They'll take the ranch anyway. Maybe. Not maybe. Definitely. You heard what I owe. You can see what I made. The math doesn't work. So change the math. How? Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his own saddlebag and pulled out a leather fold that clinked when he set it down. I've got about $800 here, saved from other jobs. You can have it. Arden stared at him. I can't take your money. Why not? Because it's yours. Because you earned it. Because I can't pay you back. Who said anything about paying back? Consider it an investment in someone who's too stubborn to quit, even when she should. He pushed the fold toward her. Take it. Add it to what you made. It still won't be enough, but maybe it's enough to negotiate with the bank. Rowan, take it, Arden. Let someone help you for once. She picked up the fold, feeling the weight of coins and bills that represented years of work for him. Why would you do this? I told you, I'm figuring out what kind of man I want to be. Turns out, it's the kind who helps when he can. He stood up, offering his hand. Now we've got about 3 hours to get back to Dry Hollow. You going to sit here or are you going to fight? Arden took his hand and stood. Her shoulder screamed. Her whole body screamed, but she was still standing. I'm going to fight. They rode hard for Dry Hollow, pushing their exhausted horses past what was reasonable, past what was safe. The sun climbed toward noon, then past it, measuring out the hours Arden had left in harsh light and heat that made everything shimmer at the edges. Rowan kept pace beside her, neither of them speaking. There was nothing left to say. Either they'd make it in time or they wouldn't. Either the money would be enough or it wouldn't. All the talk in the world couldn't change arithmetic or turn exhaustion into speed. Arden's shoulder had gone from screaming pain to a dull throb that spread through her entire right side. She couldn't lift her arm above her chest anymore, and gripping the reins took concentration that should have been automatic. But she didn't slow down, couldn't. The only direction left was forward. They were maybe 10 miles out when they saw the dust cloud behind them. Rowan noticed first, turning in his saddle to look back. We've got company. Arden looked and felt her stomach drop. 4 riders, moving fast, closing the distance between them. Colton's men? Who else? Rowan checked his rifle, making sure it was loaded. They're going to try to delay us. Make sure we don't make the deadline. How far to town? Too far to outrun them with horses this tired. Arden's mind raced through options that all ended badly. They could try to run and probably get caught anyway. They could turn and fight, but 4 against 2 were odds that got people killed. Or they could split up, she said. You keep riding for Dry Hollow. I'll lead them off, buy you time to get to the bank. That's the dumbest thing you've said yet, and you've said some pretty dumb things. It's the only play we have. They want to stop me specifically, stop me from making the payment. If they're chasing me, they're not stopping you. And what happens when they catch you? I'll figure it out. Arden, this is my fight, Rowan. It always has been. You've done more than enough. Take the money, get to the bank, tell Grissom I made the payment. That's all that matters. Rowan's jaw was set in a way that said he wanted to argue, but the dust cloud was getting closer. They had maybe 5 minutes before the riders caught up. You better not die. Your father would never forgive me. My father's dead. He doesn't get a vote anymore. She handed him the leather fold with all their money, watching him tuck it into his saddlebag. Now go, fast as you can. She spurred her horse off the main trail, heading east toward rougher country, while Rowan continued north. For a moment, she wasn't sure the riders would follow her. What if they split up? What if they went after Rowan instead? But then she saw the dust cloud shift direction, chasing her, and she felt a grim satisfaction. At least the plan was working. Her horse was already tired, already pushed past its limits. She could feel it struggling beneath her, could hear its breathing turn ragged. The riders behind her had fresher mounts, and they were gaining fast. She needed an advantage, needed something to even the odds before they ran her down in open country. Ahead, the land broke into a series of dry washes and small canyons, not as dramatic as Devil's Canyon, but still rough enough to be dangerous if you didn't know the terrain. Arden had ridden through here with her father years ago, checking on strays that had wandered from the home range. She remembered a narrow wash with high walls and a dogleg turn that made it impossible to see what was ahead. She pushed toward it, her horse stumbling once on loose rocks but recovering. Behind her, the riders were close enough now that she could hear them shouting to each other, close enough that if they decided to shoot, they might hit her. The wash opened up in front of her, and she rode in without hesitation, trusting memory and luck in equal measure. The walls rose on either side, blocking out the sun, and she made the dogleg turn just as the first rider entered behind her. Arden pulled up hard, dismounted in one fluid motion despite her injured shoulder, and took position behind a boulder with her revolver drawn. Her horse, sensing freedom, kept running deeper into the wash. Good. Let them think she was still running. The first rider came around the corner fast and she fired. Not at him, she wasn't trying to kill anyone yet, but at his horse's feet. The animal reared, screaming, and threw its rider hard into the rocks. The man went down and didn't get up. The second and third riders pulled up short, smart enough not to charge blind into the same trap. Arden heard them talking, their voices echoing off the canyon walls, but too distorted to make out words. Then silence. They were waiting her out, probably circling to find another way in. She couldn't stay here. Sooner or later they'd box her in, or her ammunition would run out, or both. She needed to move, but where? Deeper into the wash was a dead end. Back the way she came meant running straight into them. The walls were too steep to climb with an injured shoulder. She was still trying to figure out her next move when she heard a horse approaching from the opposite direction, from deeper in the wash. That didn't make sense unless... Rowan appeared around the far bend, leading her horse by the reins. Heard gunfire. Figured you were either winning or losing badly. I told you to go to town. I got halfway there and realized I didn't actually know where the bank was. Seemed important. He dismounted and took position beside her. Besides, 4 against 1 are terrible odds. 4 against 2 are just bad odds. I'll take bad over terrible. Arden wanted to be angry at him, wanted to tell him he'd just thrown away their only chance, but she was too relieved to see him to manage it. The bank's on Main Street, big white building. You can't miss it. I'll keep that in mind for next time. He checked his rifle. How many out there? 4. I dropped 1. The other 3 are circling. So we've got maybe 5 minutes before they figure out a way to come at us from multiple directions. He looked around the wash, evaluating. We can't defend this position. Too many angles. I'm open to suggestions. Rowan pointed back the way he'd come. About a quarter mile that direction, the wash opens up into flat ground near a homestead. Place has been abandoned for years, but the buildings are still standing. We could ford up there, make them come to us on our terms. And if they just wait us out, we're on a deadline, remember? Then we don't give them the option. We make noise, make them think we're panicking, draw them in close, and end it fast. It was a bad plan, but it was the only plan they had. All right, let's move. They mounted up and rode hard through the wash, Arden's shoulder screaming with every jolt, but she held on. Behind them, she heard shouts. The riders had figured out where they went. The race was on again. The abandoned homestead appeared exactly where Rowan said it would. 3 buildings in various states of collapse around a dried-up well. The main house was missing most of its roof, but the barn still had 4 walls and a door that hung crooked on its hinges. They rode the horses inside and dismounted. You take the house, I'll take the barn, Rowan said. When they come in, we hit them from 2 directions. They'll be expecting 1 shooter, not 2. What if they don't come in? Then we're about to find out if I'm as good at yelling as I am at shooting. He gripped her good shoulder briefly. Don't die in the next 5 minutes. Would really complicate things. Same to you. They split up, Arden running for the house while Rowan stayed in the barn. She found a position near a collapsed window that gave her a clear view of the approach. Her hands were shaking, adrenaline, exhaustion, fear all mixing together, but she forced them steady. 5 rounds left in her revolver. She'd have to make them count. The riders appeared at the edge of the property, moving cautiously now. 3 men, all armed, all clearly working for someone who paid them to be good at violence. They spread out, trying to cover multiple angles, calling to each other in low voices. "We know you're in there," one of them shouted. "Mr. Colton just wants to talk. No one needs to get hurt." Arden almost laughed, as if Colton had ever just wanted to talk, as if this whole thing hadn't been designed to hurt her from the very beginning. "Tell Colton if he wants to talk, he can come himself instead of sending his dogs," she shouted back. "Now that's not very friendly." "Neither is trying to run me off my own land. Neither is sabotaging my father's business. Neither is following me across the territory to make sure I fail." Arden's voice was raw, all the anger and grief of the past weeks coming out at once. "So no, I'm not feeling particularly friendly right now." The men looked at each other, clearly not sure how to handle a woman who wouldn't be intimidated. Finally, one of them called out, "We're coming in. You can surrender or you can make this difficult. Either way, you're not making that bank deadline. Try me." They moved in fast, coordinated, professionals doing a job they'd probably done dozens of times before. 2 went for the barn where they thought she was hiding. The 3rd came toward the house, gun drawn, ready to flush her out or pin her down. That's when Rowan opened fire from the barn. The 2 men targeting the barn scattered, caught completely off guard. One went down immediately, hit in the leg. The other dove behind the well, returning fire. The 3rd man spun toward the house and Arden fired, catching him in the shoulder. He dropped his gun and went down cursing. The man behind the well was trapped now, pinned between 2 shooters with no good cover. He shouted something Arden couldn't make out, then threw down his gun and raised his hands. "I'm done. I'm out." Rowan emerged from the barn, rifle trained on the man. "Smart choice. Now get your friends and get out of here. Tell Colton we're not interested in his offers. He's not going to let this go. Don't care. Move." The 3 men limped away, helping each other toward their horses. Arden watched them go, her revolver still raised, not trusting this was really over. But they mounted up and rode off, heading back the way they'd come, leaving nothing but dust and blood behind. When they were out of sight, Arden's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the broken porch, her whole body shaking with reaction. Rowan came over and sat beside her. "You hit?" he asked. "No, you?" "No." He reloaded his rifle with practiced movements. "That was closer than I'd like." Story of this whole week. Arden checked the position of the sun. Late afternoon, maybe 3 or 4 hours of daylight left. "We need to go. Now." They mounted up one more time, both of them running on nothing but determination and fear of what would happen if they stopped. The horses were barely moving, and Arden's shoulder had gone numb, which she knew was bad but didn't have time to worry about. Dry Hollow appeared on the horizon like a mirage, shimmering in the heat. Main Street was nearly empty, most people inside escaping the worst of the afternoon sun. Arden and Rowan rode straight to the bank, dismounting in front of the white building that had haunted her nightmares for days. Grissom was standing on the porch, pocket watch in hand, looking smug. Beside him stood Warren Colton himself, tall, well-dressed, everything about him radiating the casual certainty of a man who always won. "Miss Vale," Grissom said, his voice dripping false sympathy. "I'm afraid you're too late. The deadline was noon. It's now after 4. "The deadline was 10 days, Arden said, forcing her voice steady despite exhaustion. "Today is the 10th day. I'm here to make payment." The term specified payment by noon of the 10th day. You're well past that. Arden felt the ground shifting beneath her, felt the trap closing. That wasn't in the original paperwork. I read it. There was an addendum, filed 3 days ago with the territorial court. Grissom pulled out a document showing her the fine print that might as well have been written in poison. Perfectly legal. The bank is now authorized to take possession of the property. She stared at the paper, at the signatures and stamps that sealed her fate. After everything, the drive, the storm, the stampede, the fights, she'd lost anyway. Not because she wasn't fast enough or strong enough or determined enough, because the game was rigged from the start. "This isn't legal," she said quietly. "You changed the terms without notification. We sent notification to your ranch 3 days ago. Not our fault if you weren't there to receive it. Grissom's smile was a knife. I'm sorry, Miss Vale. The property reverts to the bank. You have 48 hours to vacate. Colton stepped forward, and Arden saw triumph in his eyes. Unfortunate situation, but I'm still willing to make an offer for your remaining cattle and equipment. Won't be much, but it's better than nothing. I'd rather burn it all. That's the grief talking. Give yourself a few days to think clearly. He turned to leave, already dismissing her as a problem solved. That's when Rowan spoke up. Actually, there's a territorial ordinance about amended financial contracts. Section 12, subsection 4, says any changes to existing loan terms require 14 days written notice, not 3. And the notice has to be delivered in person or by registered courier, not just dropped at a property. Everyone turned to look at him. Grissom's smile faltered. That's exactly right. I watched a case in Flagstaff last year where a bank tried the same thing, lost in territorial court, and had to pay damages. Rowan pulled out the paperwork Arden had given him. Your addendum isn't legal, which means the original deadline stands, end of the 10th day, not noon. She's got until sunset, and sunset's not for another 2 hours. Grissom's face went red. You can't. I just did. Now, do you want to take her payment, or do you want to explain to the territorial court why you tried to illegally seize property? Silence stretched out. Arden watched Grissom and Colton looking at each other, watched the calculation happening behind their eyes. They could fight this, drag it through courts, but that would draw attention neither of them wanted. Better to take the loss and move on. Finally, Grissom pulled himself together. Very well. How much are you paying? Arden took the leather fold from Rowan and counted out the bills. $4,370. That's partial payment on the $12,000 owed. That's not enough to clear the debt. I know, but it's enough to extend the loan under the hardship provisions. Section A8 of the original contract, which is still the controlling document since your addendum is illegal. I'm requesting a 6-month extension to pay the remainder. Grissom looked like he wanted to argue, but too many people were watching now. Word would spread fast if the bank refused a legal request, and that kind of reputation damage wasn't worth one ranch. 6 months. But the interest continues to accrue. And if you miss that deadline, there's no negotiation. Understood. The money changed hands. Grissom counted it twice, clearly hoping to find it short, but the numbers were exact. He wrote out a receipt with angry, cramped handwriting and shoved it at her. 6 months, Miss Vale. Not a day more. Arden took the receipt, folded it carefully, and put it in her pocket next to her father's letter. Then she turned to Colton, who was watching with barely contained fury. Tell your men if they come on my property again, I'll shoot first and ask questions later. And next time you want something I have, try asking instead of stealing. You might be surprised what honesty gets you. Colton's smile was ice. This isn't over. Yeah, it is. Maybe not forever, but for today, I won. And right now, that's enough. She turned and walked away, Rowan falling into step beside her. They made it to the edge of town before Arden's legs finally gave out completely. She sat down in the dust, her whole body shaking with exhaustion and relief and disbelief. Rowan sat beside her, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. How did you know about that ordinance? She finally asked. I didn't. Made the whole thing up. Arden turned to stare at him. You what? Made it up. There probably is some law like that somewhere, and Grissom didn't know enough to call the bluff. Sometimes you play the cards you're dealt. Sometimes you deal yourself better ones. He grinned at her shocked expression. What? You think honest men survive out here? Despite everything, Arden laughed. It came out half sob, but it was still a laugh. We could have gone to jail. Nah. Worst case, they checked the law books and we're back where we started. But they didn't want to risk it. Men like that, they're used to everyone folding. When someone stands up, they don't know what to do. My father would have liked you. Your father did like me. That's why I'm here. Rowan stood and offered his hand. Come on, let's go home. Home. The word felt strange and familiar at the same time. Arden took his hand and let him pull her up. They walked back to their horses, mounted up one last time, and rode out of Dry Hollow together. The ranch appeared in the fading light, unchanged and ordinary. But everything felt different. The land was still hers. The cattle were gone, but the water remained. The building stood. The future was possible. Not guaranteed, not easy, but possible. They dismounted in front of the house and stood there for a moment, neither quite ready to acknowledge what they'd just survived. 6 months, Arden said. I have to come up with $7,630 in 6 months. Could be worse. How? Could be 7,631. Rowan's expression turned serious. You're going to need help. Can't run a ranch alone and make that kind of money. I know. I'll figure it out. Or I could stay. Help you rebuild the herd, work the land, split the profits until the debt's paid. Arden looked at him, this stranger who'd become something else over 6 impossible days. Why would you do that? Because I'm tired of drifting. Because I think you're building something worth being part of. Because... He stopped, seeming to choose his words carefully. Because I've spent 10 years working other people's ranches, taking other people's orders, never having a stake in anything. You're offering me a stake. That's worth more than wages. It's going to be hard. Harder than the drive. Colton's not going to stop trying to take this land. Good. I like a challenge. He held out his hand. Partners? Arden thought about her father's letter, about everything he'd built and fought for and lost. Thought about the past 10 days and everything she'd learned about strength and stubbornness and the difference between giving up and knowing when to accept help. She shook his hand. Partners. They stood there as the sun set over the Arizona frontier, 2 people who'd driven cattle through hell and somehow made it back. The future was uncertain, the debt was massive, and Warren Colton was still out there planning his next move. But for tonight, they'd won. And that victory tasted sweet enough to make the next fight worth starting. Arden walked into her father's house, her house now, and started making coffee. Rowan followed, settling into a chair at the kitchen table like he'd been doing it for years. They didn't talk much. Didn't need to. The silence between them was the kind earned through shared hardship, the kind that didn't need filling. Outside, the desert wind picked up, carrying with it the smell of sage and dust and possibility. Tomorrow would bring new problems, new challenges, new reasons to doubt whether any of this was worth it. But tomorrow was hours away yet. Tonight, Ardenvale was home. She was alive, and the ranch her father died protecting was still hers. That was enough. The first week back felt longer than the entire drive. Arden's shoulder took 3 weeks to heal properly, and even then it ached when storms rolled in. She'd refused to see a doctor, couldn't afford one. So Rowan had done what he could with whiskey and clean bandages and a patience she hadn't known existed. The bruising faded from purple to yellow to green before finally disappearing, leaving only a tender spot that reminded her every morning what she'd survived. They fell into a rhythm without discussing it. Rowan took the small bunkhouse her father's hands used to occupy, keeping his distance in a way that felt respectful rather than cold. Mornings, they'd meet at the barn and divide the day's work. Afternoons, they'd work separately. Him on fence repairs and water management, her handling the books and trying to figure out how to make $7,000 appear from nowhere. It was during one of those afternoon sessions, 2 weeks after returning from Prescott, that Arden found the answer in the most unexpected place. She'd been going through her father's old correspondence, looking for names of buyers who might deal fairly, when she came across a letter dated 6 months before his death. It was from a cattle broker in Tucson, someone her father had worked with years ago. The letter mentioned interest in a different kind of arrangement, contract grazing for wealthy eastern buyers who wanted to invest in western cattle without managing herds themselves. Arden read it 3 times, her mind working through possibilities. The Tucson broker was offering to place cattle on her ranch, pay her to graze and manage them, then split profits when they sold. Low risk for her, steady income, and she'd still control her own land. She found Rowan in the north pasture, rebuilding a section of fence that had collapsed during their absence. I might have an idea, she said. He looked up from his work, sweat dripping down his face. Does it involve me doing less fence work? Because I'd support that idea. Contract grazing. We don't buy cattle, we manage them for investors. They provide the animals and the capital, we provide the land and the work. When the cattle sell, we split the profits. Rowan set down his hammer, thinking it through. We'd need water rights documentation, proof we can support a herd through dry season. And we'd need references, people vouching that we know what we're doing. My father had relationships. I could leverage those. Your father also had Colton working against him. Those same people might not want to risk crossing Colton by working with you. Then we find new people. People who don't know Colton or don't care what he thinks. Arden pulled out the letter. This broker in Tucson never worked with Colton. He's independent, deals with Eastern money. If we can convince him we're worth the risk, we bypass the local politics entirely. Rowan took the letter and read it carefully. This could work, but you'd need to go to Tucson, meet with him in person. Letters are too easy to ignore. I know. You hate leaving the ranch. I hate losing it more. Arden looked out across the property, at the land her father had died protecting. Besides, I've already driven cattle 200 miles with no sleep and people trying to kill me. How bad can one business meeting be? Rowan's smile was brief but genuine. Want company? Need you here. Someone has to keep an eye on things, make sure Colton doesn't try anything while I'm gone. Fair enough. When do you leave? Tomorrow. No point waiting. That night, Arden packed light. A change of clothes, her father's letters of introduction, the bank receipt showing she'd made partial payment. Everything she needed to prove she was legitimate, that she could be trusted with someone else's investment. Rowan walked her out to the barn the next morning, checking her horse and supplies with the thoroughness of someone who'd learned that details mattered. Stay on main roads. Don't engage if Colton's men follow you. And if the broker says no, then I find another broker or another plan. I'm not giving up because one person tells me no. Didn't think you would. Just wanted to hear you say it. He handed her the reins. Be careful out there. Same to you. If Colton shows up, I'll handle it. Go. The ride to Tucson took 2 days, and Arden spent most of them rehearsing what she'd say. How to present herself as competent without seeming desperate. How to acknowledge the difficulties without dwelling on them. How to ask for trust from someone who had no reason to give it. Tucson was bigger than she'd expected, louder and more crowded than Dry Hollow could ever dream of being. She found the broker's office on the second floor of a building that smelled like cigar smoke and leather. The sign on the door read, Sterling & Associates, Cattle Investment Management. She knocked, and a voice called, Come in! The man behind the desk was older than she'd pictured, maybe 60, with gray hair and eyes that assessed her in one quick sweep. Help you? Mr. Sterling, I'm Arden Vale. My father was Thomas Vale. He corresponded with you about 6 months ago regarding contract grazing arrangements. Sterling's expression shifted, recognition mixing with something that might have been sympathy. I heard about Thomas. I'm sorry. He was a good man. He was. And he built a good ranch. I'm here to discuss the arrangement he was interested in before he passed. You're running the ranch now? I am. Sterling leaned back in his chair, studying her with the same careful attention Rowan had shown when they first met, weighing, calculating, deciding whether to take her seriously. No offense, Miss Vale, but contract grazing requires significant management capability. We'd be trusting you with valuable assets. I understand that, which is why I brought documentation. She laid out the letters from her father's former business partners, the bank receipt, a detailed inventory of her water sources and grazing capacity. I also just completed a 200-mile cattle drive through rough country with minimal crew, delivered the herd on deadline despite interference, and negotiated a fair sale in a buyer's market. I know cattle, I know the land, and I know how to get things done even when circumstances aren't ideal. Sterling picked up the documents, reading through them slowly. Says here you made partial payment on a substantial debt. How much is still outstanding? $7,630. Due in just under 6 months. That's a lot of money. It is, which is why I need steady income, not just one-time sales. Contract grazing gives me that. It also requires upfront investment, improved fencing, water infrastructure, possibly additional hands during busy seasons. You have capital for that. Not much, but I've got a partner who's skilled with infrastructure, and we're both willing to work 7 days a week if that's what it takes. Partner? Sterling's eyebrows went up. You're married? No, business partner, Rowan Cross. He's former trail boss, knows cattle and land management. He's currently handling ranch operations while I'm here. Sterling set down the papers and looked at her directly. I'm going to be honest with you, Miss Vale. I get approached by people wanting contract arrangements every week. Most of them are looking for easy money without understanding the work involved. But I knew your father, and he was meticulous. If you're half as capable as he was, you might be worth the risk." He paused. "However, I've also heard rumors about trouble with Warren Colton. That true?" Arden met his eyes without flinching. "Colton wants my land. He's tried multiple ways to take it. None of them have worked so far. Look, that kind of conflict makes investors nervous. They don't want their assets caught in local power struggles. Then they should invest with someone who knows how to protect what matters. Colton's tried sabotage, manipulation, and direct interference. I'm still here. That should tell you something about my ability to handle adversity." Sterling's lips twitched toward a smile. "Fair point. All right, here's what I'm willing to offer. Trial period, 30 head of cattle, 3 months. You manage them. Show me you can maintain their health and condition, and we'll discuss expanding the arrangement. Payment would be $30 a head per month, plus 20% of any profit when they sell." Arden did the math quickly. $900 over 3 months, plus potential profit share. Not enough to clear her debt entirely, but enough to make serious progress while she figured out additional income sources. "And if I exceed expectations, prove I can handle a larger herd? Then we talk about 100 head, maybe more. But first you prove yourself with 30. When can you deliver them?" 2 weeks. That give you enough time to prepare?" "More than enough." Arden stood and offered her hand. "You won't regret this." Sterling shook her hand firmly. "See that I don't. And Miss Vale, watch your back. Men like Colton don't take losing well." The ride home felt shorter, or maybe Arden was just too busy planning to notice the miles. 30 head wasn't much, but it was a start. She'd need to repair the east pasture fence, clear out one of the troughs, maybe hire temporary help for the delivery. The costs would cut into the early profits, but it was investment, not waste. She arrived at the ranch just after sunset to find Rowan on the porch, rifle across his knees, looking tense. "What happened?" she asked, dismounting quickly. "Company. About an hour after you left yesterday. Colton himself, along with Palmer and 2 others. Arden's hand dropped to her revolver. "They try anything?" "No, just talked. Colton made another offer to buy the property. Said he'd pay fair market value plus cover your remaining debt. Called it a gesture of goodwill." "And you said?" "I said the property wasn't for sale, and he should take up any future business with you directly. He didn't like that much." Rowan stood, stretching out stiff muscles. "He also mentioned he'd heard you were in Tucson. Asked what business you had there." "How would he know that?" "He's got eyes everywhere. Or he's guessing and fishing for confirmation. Either way, he's watching us close." Arden climbed the porch steps and sat down, suddenly exhausted. "We got the contract. Sterling's sending 30 head in 2 weeks. Trial period, but if it works out, he'll send more." "That's good news. Colton's going to hate it." "Colton hates everything I do. Doesn't change what needs to happen." She looked at Rowan. "We'll need help with the delivery. Someone we trust to handle the cattle while we deal with Sterling's representatives." "I might know someone. Old friend from Texas. Decent hand, honest. He's been working claims down near the border, but he mentioned wanting steadier work." "Can you reach him?" "I can try. No guarantees he's available or interested. Try anyway. We're going to need all the help we can get." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. They repaired fencing until Arden's hands were raw despite the calluses. They cleared brush from the east pasture, creating clean lines that would make it easier to monitor the herd. They tested every water source, making sure flow was strong and reliable. Rowan's friend arrived 3 days before the delivery, a quiet man named Samuel Chen who'd come west from California and learned ranching the hard way. He didn't talk much, but he worked with the same focused competence as Rowan, and Arden found herself trusting him almost immediately. "You know what you're getting into here?" she asked him the first night, over coffee that was more grounds than liquid. Samuel shrugged. "Rowan says you're worth working for. That's good enough for me. Plus I was getting tired of claim work. Too much digging, not enough writing. This isn't going to be easy. Colton's going to keep pushing, and I don't have money for proper wages yet." "Don't need much. Got a place to sleep, decent food, work that matters. That's more than a lot of people have." The cattle arrived exactly on schedule, 30 head of good stock that Sterling's men delivered with careful documentation. Arden signed for each animal, checked them over for injuries or illness, and felt a weight lift that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. This was real. She had a path forward. Sterling's foreman, a weathered man named Dutch, stayed to verify conditions. He walked the property with Arden, asking questions about water access, grazing rotation, her plans for winter feeding. She answered everything directly, showing him the systems she and Rowan had set up, the records she'd been keeping, the attention to detail that would prove she could be trusted with more. "You've done good work here," Dutch said finally. "Better than I expected, honestly. Sterling will want my report in a week. If things look as good then as they do now, I'd expect he'll want to expand the arrangement." After he left, Arden stood in the pasture watching the cattle graze, and for the first time since her father's death, she felt something like hope. Not certainty. The debt was still massive, Colton was still circling, and 6 months was not a lot of time. But hope was enough to work with. The months that followed developed their own rhythm. Arden, Rowan, and Samuel worked the ranch like a single organism, each knowing what needed doing without extensive discussion. The Sterling cattle thrived, and Dutch's weekly reports were positive enough that by the end of the trial period, Sterling sent another 70 head along with a revised contract. Arden signed without hesitation. 100 cattle at $30 a head per month. $3,000 monthly income, minus costs for feed supplements and Samuel's wages and various infrastructure investments. After expenses, she was clearing about $2,200 a month. Not enough to pay off the debt in 6 months, but enough to make serious progress. She negotiated an extension with the bank. Another bitter meeting with Grissom, where she laid out detailed financial projections and forced him to acknowledge she had a viable business plan. He extended the deadline by 3 months, bringing her total time to 9 months from the original deadline, but he added penalty interest that made her teeth hurt. "You're just delaying the inevitable," Grissom had said. His smugness returned now that he thought he had her trapped again. "We'll see," Arden replied, and walked out before she said something she'd regret. Colton stayed quiet through those months, which worried Arden more than his previous interference. Men like him didn't just accept defeat. They regrouped and came back harder. She kept waiting for the next attack, kept watching for his men on the property, but nothing happened until the water stopped flowing. It was Samuel who noticed first, checking the southern spring during his morning rounds. "Flows down to almost nothing," he reported. "Happened overnight. Springs don't just dry up like that." Arden rode out with him and Rowan to check all 3 springs. The southern was nearly dry. The eastern was down to a trickle. The northern, their primary source, was still flowing strong, but if the pattern continued, it would fail too. "Sabotage," Rowan said flatly. "Someone's diverting water upstream." "Colton. Has to be. He's got property on the high side of this watershed. He could dam or reroute the flow before it reaches your land." Arden felt cold fury settle in her gut. The cattle needed water. Without it, they'd lose condition fast, and Sterling would pull his contract. Everything she'd built over the past months would collapse. "Can we prove it?" "We'd have to ride onto his property, find where he's diverting, and document it. Then take it to the territorial marshal." "That could take weeks. We don't have weeks." "What's the alternative? Fight him directly?" Arden looked at the dying spring, at the water that represented everything, the cattle, the debt, her father's legacy, her own survival. Then she looked at Rowan and Samuel. "How do you feel about a midnight ride?" Rowan's smile was dangerous. "About time." They waited until well after dark, when Colton's ranch would be mostly asleep. 3 riders in black carrying tools and enough ammunition to handle trouble if it found them. They crossed onto Colton's property at the northern boundary, following the watershed up into the hills where the springs originated. It took 2 hours of careful searching, but they found it. A crude dam built across the stream, diverting 90% of the flow into an irrigation channel that fed Colton's northern pastures. Recent construction, still fresh. Palmer's work, probably, done quickly and quietly, while everyone was focused on the ranch below. "So we tear it down," Samuel said, already dismounting. "Wait." Arden studied the setup, thinking, if we just destroy it, he'll claim we sabotaged his property. He'll have the law on us instead of the other way around. So what do? We document it, every detail. Then we give him a choice, remove it himself or face territorial charges for water theft. They spent the next hour sketching the dam's construction, taking measurements, writing down everything that could be used as evidence. Arden even carved marks into nearby trees, creating permanent reference points that would prove the dam's location and recent construction. Then they rode back, reaching the ranch just before dawn. "Now what?" Samuel asked. "Now we wait for sunrise, then I pay Colton a visit, alone." "Bad idea," Rowan said immediately. "He'll try to intimidate you or worse." "Maybe, but he's also a businessman. If I come with guns, this turns into a shooting war. If I come alone, with evidence and a reasonable proposal, he might actually listen. And if he doesn't, then I file charges with the marshal and let the territorial court handle it. But I'm giving him the chance to back down first." Arden looked at both of them. "My father spent years fighting Colton head-on. It killed him. Maybe it's time to try something different." She rode to Colton's ranch 3 hours later, dressed in clean clothes but still armed, documentation in her saddlebag. The house was enormous, testament to decades of successful empire building. A hand met her at the gate. "Business with Mr. Colton," she said. "He expecting you?" "No, but he'll want to hear what I have to say." The hand looked uncertain, but waved her through. She was shown to a study where Colton sat behind a massive desk that probably cost more than her entire ranch. He looked surprised to see her, then amused. "Miss Vale, to what do I owe this unexpected visit?" Arden laid the documentation on his desk. "You're diverting water from my springs. I have measurements, sketches, and witness statements. Territorial law says water theft is a criminal offense, punishable by fines and possible property seizure." Colton barely glanced at the papers. "Those are strong accusations." "They're facts. The dam was built in the last week. Fresh lumber, recent disturbance to the stream bed. Any marshal would confirm it in about 10 minutes. And yet you came here instead of going to the marshal. Why?" "Because I'm tired of fighting. Because my father spent years in conflict with you, and it destroyed him. Because I think maybe we can find a solution that doesn't involve courts and lawyers and more bad blood." Arden leaned forward. "Remove the dam. Let the water flow naturally. In exchange, I'll sign a formal agreement acknowledging your water rights to the northern watershed, the parts that are legitimately on your property. We establish clear boundaries. Both of us stay on our side, and this ends." Colton steepled his fingers, studying her. "You're asking me to give up a strategic advantage out of the goodness of my heart. I'm offering you a way to avoid criminal charges and costly legal battles. Plus, if I lose my ranch because you've strangled my water, Sterling will just place his cattle elsewhere. You gain nothing except more enemies and a reputation for underhanded tactics. Is that really what you want?" "What I want is your land." "I know, and you're not getting it. Not this way, not any way. So the question is whether you keep fighting a battle you're not winning, or whether you accept that sometimes people don't fold just because you want them to." Silence stretched between them. Arden could see Colton calculating, weighing the costs and benefits of continued conflict versus grudging peace. She'd gambled that his business instincts would override his pride. If she was wrong, this could go very badly. Finally, Colton laughed. Genuine amusement, not mockery. "You're more like Thomas than I expected. He was stubborn too. Also smart enough to know when to negotiate instead of shoot." He pulled the documentation toward him, reading it properly this time. "All right, Miss Vale, I'll remove the dam, and we'll establish formal boundaries for water rights, but I want something in return." "What?" "If you ever do decide to sell, and I mean if, not when, you give me first refusal. Same terms you'd accept from anyone else, but I get the chance to match them before you close the deal." Arden considered it. First refusal didn't obligate her to sell, just gave him the option to compete if she chose to. It was a reasonable ask. "Agreed, but the boundaries have to be legally documented and filed with the Territorial Land Office. No verbal agreements that disappear when it's convenient." "Agreed. I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers." Colton stood and offered his hand. "I'm not saying we're friends, Miss Vale, but maybe we don't have to be enemies." Arden shook his hand, feeling the strength in his grip and the calculation in his eyes. He was a dangerous man, and she didn't trust him remotely. But she'd gotten what she needed. The water would flow again, and the constant threat of sabotage would ease. "One more thing," Colton said as she turned to leave. "That partner of yours, Cross? He's got a reputation. Men say he's killed before. Is there a question in there?" Just an observation. You're working with someone dangerous. Make sure that doesn't come back to bite you. Rowan's business is his own. All I care about is that he's honest and he works hard. That's more than I can say for some people. She met Colton's eyes directly. Have a good day, Mr. Colton. Hope I don't see you again anytime soon. The water started flowing again within 2 days. The formal agreement took a week to draft and another week to file. But once it was done, Arden felt a weight lift. One major threat neutralized. Sterling's cattle had access to reliable water. The path forward was clearer than it had been in months. By the time the 9-month deadline approached, Arden had managed to save and earn $6,000. Still short of the full amount, but close enough that she went to the bank with a proposal. Grissom looked at her numbers with barely concealed disappointment. You're still $1,500 short. I am, but I've demonstrated consistent income and reliable business relationships. I'm requesting a restructured loan, lower interest rate, longer payment schedule, same total amount. You get your money, I keep my ranch, everyone wins. The bank doesn't negotiate with debtors in default. I'm not in default. I'm ahead of schedule on a modified timeline that you approved. And if you force foreclosure, you'll spend months trying to sell a property in a depressed market, while I'll go to every newspaper in the territory and explain how you changed loan terms mid-contract to help Warren Colton steal a ranch. How do you think that plays? Grissom's face flushed red. That's slander. It's truth. The only question is whether you want it public. Arden pushed her proposal across the desk. Or you can work with me. Take the restructured loan. Tell your bosses you successfully recovered a troubled debt and turned it into steady income for the bank. That's a win you can take credit for. She watched him struggle between pride and pragmatism. Finally, pragmatism won. I'll present this to the board, but I'm not promising anything. That's all I'm asking. The board approved the restructured loan a week later. $1,500 immediate payment, the remainder stretched over 3 years at reduced interest. It would take time to fully clear the debt, but it was manageable. The ranch was safe. Arden made the payment in person, counting out the bills with hands that only shook slightly. When Grissom handed her the new paperwork, officially documenting the restructured terms, she felt something she hadn't felt in nearly a year. Security. She walked out of the bank into afternoon sun that felt warmer than it had any right to. Rowan was waiting across the street, leaning against a post with his hat pulled low. When he saw her expression, he straightened. We good? We're good. Loans restructured. Ranch is ours for real this time. Rowan's smile was genuine. About damn time. They walked to the general store, bought supplies they'd been deferring for months, and rode home together as the sun set. Samuel was waiting at the ranch with coffee and a simple dinner he'd managed to pull together. The three of them sat on the porch as darkness fell, not talking much, just existing in the shared space of hard work survived and futures secured. That night, after Samuel had turned in and Rowan was heading to the bunkhouse, Arden stopped him. Thank you. For everything. For showing up when I needed help. For staying when things got hard. For not treating me like I needed saving. Rowan turned back, his face half in shadow. You never needed saving. You needed someone who wouldn't quit on you. That's different. Still, I wouldn't have made it without you. Maybe. But I wouldn't have wanted to be anywhere else. He hesitated, then added, This partnership we've got, it's good. I'd like to keep it going, if you would. Yeah, I would. Arden felt something warm in her chest, something that went beyond gratitude or relief. We make a decent team. Decent's one word for it. Rowan's smile was visible even in the darkness. Get some sleep. Morning comes early. The months that followed brought their own challenges. Weather, market fluctuations, the endless work of maintaining a ranch. But they were manageable challenges, the kind you faced with partners and plans instead of desperation and fear. Sterling expanded their contract to 150 head, then 200. Other brokers heard about their success and started making inquiries. Arden negotiated carefully, never overextending, always building slowly. By the end of the first year, the ranch was profitable. By the end of the second year, she'd paid off more than half the remaining debt. Rowan stayed, evolving from partner to something closer to co-owner as his investment of labor and expertise became inseparable from the ranch's success. Samuel stayed too, bringing in his brother to help during busy seasons. The ranch grew. Not explosively, but steadily, the kind of growth that could be sustained, that didn't require sacrificing everything for short-term gains. Colton kept his distance, true to their agreement. Occasionally Arden would see him in town, and they'd exchange curt nods that weren't quite respect but weren't hostility either. She'd heard he'd shifted his focus to mining operations in the Northern Territory, apparently deciding cattle ranching wasn't worth the fight anymore. Grissom left the bank after a scandal involving his personal finances. Karma, Samuel called it. His replacement was younger, more interested in sound business than power games. The relationship between Arden and the bank improved from adversarial to merely professional. 3 years after the drive that nearly killed her, Arden stood on the ridge overlooking her property and took inventory. The ranch was thriving. The debt would be fully cleared within a year. She had a crew she trusted, a business that worked, and a future that wasn't defined by her father's death or other people's expectations. Rowan rode up beside her, having finished his check of the northern fence line. Thinking deep thoughts? Thinking about how far we've come, how different things are now. Better different? Yeah, better different. She looked at him, at the man who'd appeared when she needed help most and never left. Their relationship had evolved over the years into something neither of them talked about directly, but both understood. Partnership that ran deeper than business, trust that went beyond circumstance. You ever think about what you'd do if things were different? If you hadn't stopped here that day? Sometimes, but not much. Wondering about other paths is just a way to avoid walking the one you're on. He turned in his saddle to face her directly. This path's been good. Hard as hell, but good. No regrets. None? Well, maybe I regret that first cattle drive. Still have nightmares about that damn canyon. His expression turned serious. But even that, it showed me what I was capable of. What you were capable of. Sometimes you don't know what you're made of until circumstances force you to find out. Arden thought about the girl she'd been 3 years ago, desperate, isolated, convinced she had to do everything alone or fail trying. That girl wouldn't recognize the woman she'd become, wouldn't understand that strength sometimes meant accepting help, that survival wasn't weakness just because you didn't do it alone. My father used to say the land tells you everything if you listen, she said quietly. I think he was right, but people tell you things too if you're willing to hear them. You told me I didn't have to do this alone. Took me a while to believe it, but I got there eventually. And now? Now I know that what we built here, it's not just mine, it's ours. Mine and yours and Samuel's and everyone who helped along the way. That doesn't make it less valuable, makes it stronger. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset over land they'd fought for and earned together. In the distance, Arden could see Sterling's cattle grazing peacefully, see the repaired fences and maintained buildings that represented thousands of hours of work. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. But it was theirs, built on choices and sacrifices, and the stubborn refusal to quit when quitting would have been easier. That evening, back at the ranch house, Arden pulled out her father's letter, the one she'd carried through the drive and every crisis since. She read it one more time, his handwriting still clear despite the paper's wear. Don't let them make you small. She'd followed that advice, but she'd also learned something he never quite managed, that not letting people make you small didn't mean making yourself isolated. It meant building something bigger than yourself, something that could withstand whatever storms came next. She folded the letter carefully and put it in a box with other important documents. Then she went outside where Rowan and Samuel were discussing tomorrow's work schedule, and she joined the conversation, adding her thoughts and listening to theirs, making plans for a future that finally felt secure. Later that night, Arden stood alone on the porch, looking at stars that seemed closer than they used to. The desert wind carried the scent of sage and possibility. Somewhere in the darkness, cattle moved and settled. Somewhere beyond the property line, the rest of the territory continued on, indifferent to one woman's struggle and survival. But here, on this ranch, change had happened. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just real. A woman who'd been told she couldn't succeed had built something lasting. A stranger had become family. A ranch on the edge of failure had become prosperous. Small victories maybe, but they were victories nonetheless. The town of Dry Hollow still whispered about her sometimes. The woman who'd driven cattle through hell with just one partner, who'd stood up to Colton and survived. The stories had gotten bigger over time. exaggerated in the way frontier tales always were. Some of it was even true. But Arden didn't care much about the stories. She cared about the work, about the land, about the people who'd helped her save it. She cared about proving that strength wasn't just about never falling. It was about getting back up every time you did. Years later, when people asked her about that drive, about how she'd saved the ranch, Arden would tell them the truth. She hadn't done it alone. She'd had help when she needed it, had accepted that help even when it went against every instinct that said she should handle everything herself, had built something with partners instead of in isolation. And the man who'd helped her? The stranger who'd appeared when she needed him most? He never left. Rowan Cross stayed, working beside her through seasons and challenges, through growth and setbacks. Their partnership evolved into something neither of them named but both understood. Respect earned through shared hardship, trust built over years of keeping promises, and maybe something more that they'd figure out when the time was right. But that was later. Tonight, standing on her porch with the desert wind in her hair and her father's ranch secure beneath her feet, Arden Vale felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not perfect peace, not the kind that meant all problems were solved or all threats eliminated, but the peace that came from knowing she'd fought her fight and won it, that she'd refused to be made small, refused to quit, refused to let other people's limitations define her possibilities. The ranch stood solid, the debt was manageable, the future was hers to build, and in the morning there would be work to do.